Good morning, everyone. 3 or 4 years ago, I did a series of videos on what I plant each month in my Zone 6A Ohio garden. Since then, I've had a lot of requests for reminders on what to plant when. So this year, I thought I would just do a video each day when I start a new batch of seeds, whether it's indoors or out. I'm kicking things off today, February 13th, with a big batch of indoor sowing. Now, as a reminder, before we jump in, here in Midwestern Ohio, my last estimated spring frost date is right around May 10th. So if you're following along and your frost dates are different than mine, just adjust accordingly. Now, first up are the majority of my brassicas, things like broccoli, cauliflower, cabbage, collards, kale, and mustard. Now, with some of these crops, the leafy, non-heading types in particular, like collards, kale, and mustard, I've got a little more wiggle room in terms of planting date. I can get away with starting seed later indoors, up to about early March. They can also be easily direct sown from approximately mid-March onward. But for brassicas that form ahead, so things like broccoli, cabbage, and cauliflower, this mid-February indoor start date, aiming for a transplant date of about April 1st, works the best for me. Broccoli and cabbage tend to be more forgiving in terms of slightly later planting dates, but mid-February gives me the best results overall. And for more specifically on starting brassicas from seed, be sure to check out this video. When I'm starting these veggies from seed indoors, I'm typically either using my homemade seed starting media, or I've also found that the ProMix brand works pretty well. Today, I'm using my DIY mix and adding in some gardening gold, also known as worm castings, from Missouri Worm Supply. I love adding worm castings to seed starting mix because it supplies the perfect nutrient boost to young seedlings without the concern of burning them. Castings are also an amazing amendment for the garden soil. Today, I'm also starting my celery and celeriac. Now, I've played around with timing on sowing these as well. Some years I've planted earlier, about mid-January, but I actually found that this mid-February sowing date works the best. Germination can take quite a long time on these crops, up to 3 weeks. But in general, hybrid varieties seem to have much better vigor and quicker germination. But I still figure on at least about 10 days for those seeds to sprout. I'm starting my bunching onions or scallions today also. Unlike bulbing onions, which I find that I have to start in mid-December, at the very latest early January, again, I've got a little more wiggle room with my bunching onions. They can be started indoors for an early jump start right around mid-February, or if I want to wait and direct sow them, I can plant them out as soon as that soil thaws out enough to be worked. Side note, they are also super easy to grow indoors. Another veggie I'm sowing right now is spinach. Every year, I typically start a batch of spinach indoors and then direct sow some in my garden outdoors just a smidge later. Spinach is also an excellent candidate for starting outdoors early in a cold frame. One of the biggest mistakes I see with spinach is waiting too late into the season to plant. Here in my Ohio garden, I aim for direct sowing 10 weeks before my last spring frost, which puts us in early March, even earlier in a cold frame. Spinach won't germinate in soil temperatures that are too warm, both inside and out. This is especially important to keep in mind if you're trying to start seed indoors. Do not use a heat mat and start seed in a cooler area of your home if it's possible. Now, for more specifically on sowing and growing spinach, check out this video. One herb I'm sowing today is parsley. Now, I typically sow parsley earlier, usually in mid-January, but it just slipped my mind this year. However, I have discovered one really cool tool to help me keep track of what I need to be sowing when. I just recently received the seed management system from the Love Your Seeds store. I use these heavy-duty double-sided pockets to hold my to-be-sown seeds for the upcoming months. That way, I don't forget about anything. This is going to be especially useful for remembering my December, January sown seeds next year, as well as those fall crops that tend to slip my mind each year. Luckily, my parsley will tolerate being planted a smidge later. I just don't want to wait too long because it is definitely a cool weather lover. Now, another batch of seeds I'm a little later than I wanted to be on sowing are my winter sown items. But if you're in the same boat as me, don't worry, we still have time. Typically, I aim for doing winter sowings right around the winter solstice, just because it's an easy date to remember. But since here in Ohio, we still have a good month or two of below freezing temperatures, I still have a decent window to do some winter sowings. Now, I've played around with starting all different types of veggies, herbs, and flowers via the winter sowing method, and what makes the most sense for me is starting primarily perennial herbs, especially those which benefit from cold stratification. This year, I'm starting, amongst other things, some catnip, valerian, feverfew, coneflowers, chamomile, soapwort, St. John's wort, and wild thyme. Now, some of these things actually do perform better for me when grown via winter sowing method, such as my chamomile. But for the most part, the big draw for me is the space savings. I start a lot of veggies indoors, and I only have limited space on my growing rack, so anything that can be started outdoors really helps. But I'm gonna get back to sowing seeds because I have a lot of stuff to plant today. But if you'd like to follow along with my planting all through the season, be sure to subscribe to my channel, Growfully with Jenna. Thanks for watching, and I'll see you next time.